Chapter 5 Germany and France. The leaving of Austria saddened Matteo, but new adventures were on the horizon. Father and son were off to the neighboring country of Germany. Their first stops included a few villages here and there, then a long rest in Munich. Though Matteo enjoyed Vienna, he took a fancy to the scenery of the humble Germanic structures. Munich was large, but had a calmness compared to the hustle of Vienna. Salvatore acquired a quaint room at an inn. It offered good, hearty meals. The filling food seemed to energize Matteo's creativity as he began sketching music on a spare piece of manuscript. He then practiced the new idea on his guitar. The other tenants of the inn heard the wonderful piece forming. It didn't take long before the landlord invited Matteo to practice in the pub area. As the music brought in more customers, the innkeeper gave Salvatore a few nights to stay for free. Their time in Munich was joyous, and Matteo wished to stay longer, but Salvatore had already hired a coach to take them further north. It was a quiet track through Nuremberg to Weimar. Matteo knew of the great German poet Goethe, who lived in Weimar. He hoped to meet him in passing by his home, but all of the gatherings appeared rather private. The city had other attractions to see, places to stroll. It was early autumn, so the weather was still favorable. After Weimar, Salvatore and Matteo headed for Leipzig. Matteo had completed 3 sets of his own pieces for guitar, which made him feel confident in being his own composer. He took part in salons and soirees, premiering fresh works. They became favorites for those in attendance. One man came to Matteo afterwards asking, "Are you going to publish your pieces?" "I would like to," Matteo happily answered. Salvatore intervened with that idea. "Maybe in the future," driving the conversation elsewhere. Matteo sighed within himself as he was interested in having his music published one day. After the evening's finish and returning to their rooms, Salvatore instructed Matteo, "Before you go to bed, study the next chapter in a book Violante gave you." "Si, Papa," Matteo obeyed. He opened a book of study beside the candlelight. The complicated math equations didn't interest him. He opened a different book, which had lessons on the Latin language, the usual thing in Violante's lesson plans. After a good hour of practice, Matteo yawned and blew out the candle. Salvatore was already asleep, so Matteo crawled quietly into bed to dream of guitar music. The next morning, the journey through Germany continued, heading west for France. There were still many days and cities to pass, but soon the German landscape turned into French countryside. Matteo gasped at the beauty of it. The little towns bustled with business as they went along. In the chill of the early winter, they arrived at their last destination, Paris. Matteo gazed all around this city of modernization. Everywhere were new sights, from the fashion to the food. Paris was quite the place. The atmosphere caused Matteo to fall deeply in love with it. Salvatore in haste inquired about various soirees being hosted. There were many, but unlike the other cities, it was more of a challenge to be accepted by Paris society. Many weren't at all interested in having a young boy play guitar. Salvatore took note that one name was popular among publishers. Ferdinando Carulli wrote catalogs of guitar music, and it appeared they were the most common in circulation. Matteo got some of his music and loved it very much. Salvatore did some deeper research and found that Carulli taught guitar. He was quick to write him a letter asking him to give Matteo lessons. It took a few days, but a letter of response came. Carulli agreed to meet Matteo, but lessons were in question as he was extremely busy. Salvatore was happy as he only wanted him to at least meet Matteo. Ferdinando Carulli invited them to his flat. He was kind, but spoke with an air of a tired man. "Welcome to my home. My music room is this way." Matteo and Salvatore followed Ferdinando down a small corridor. A woman came out from a room of crying children. Ferdinando asked his wife, "What's the matter, honey?" "The children want you," she sighed. "Tell them I will tend to them in a moment." Ferdinando gave a breath of exhaustion. He continued, guiding his guests to the music room. Once there, Matteo and Caruli set up their guitars. Ferdinando instructed Matteo, "Please, play for me." "I can play a work of yours if you don't mind." Matteo kept his modesty. Caruli nodded, interested to hear it. Matteo took a breath and began a piece. He played it with as much ease as he could. Caruli listened closely, watching Matteo's hands. After Matteo plucked the last chord, Caruli commented, "I see that you have much experience in performing, as your stance shows. It was a beautiful rendition, a great one, in fact. Yet I would like to give you a few lessons while you are in the city to help you improve on a few things here and there." "That would be wonderful," Matteo smiled. Caruli turned to Salvatore. "I imagine your real coming for me was to help your son find a soirée to play. I may help, as he is a virtuoso guitarist. Now that I recall, I know the Carcassi name, as I am from Italy as well. I've heard of your guitars. In exchange for helping your son, I'd like to ask if I may have a guitar from you. They have an excellent sound." "I can manage that. When I return home, I'll have a fine instrument ready to send for you," Salvatore agreed. "Excellent." Caruli became satisfied. The season in Paris had become Matteo's most favorite. He gained much knowledge from Caruli's instruction, and earned a reputation in performing at various salons and soirées. Many people asked if Matteo had published music of his own. Matteo wished ever so that he could, and felt that he had sufficient pieces to do so. It was just getting the music to a publisher. There was a sense of trouble, though. Each time the subject of publishing was brought about, Salvatore interrupted the conversation. It downhearted Matteo's hopes. He thought of one last resort. Since Caruli was a published composer, Matteo thought it best to ask him. He found Caruli speaking to a group while drinking champagne. A pianist was playing soft music at the moment. Matteo politely tapped Caruli's shoulder. "May I speak with you?" "Of course, my young student." He walked with Matteo near a corner of the room. Matteo went straight to business. "Signor Caruli, may I ask how to be a published musician?" "That is a good question." Caruli suddenly paused, looking past Matteo. Salvatore was a few paces away, looking at them sternly. Matteo knew all hope was lost. His father had spoken to Caruli. "You are still young." Caruli sounded hesitant. "And publishing is quite a process. It may be best to wait until you understand business better. Anyways, I hear the opera is performing Mozart's Don Giovanni. Let us invite your father and go. Arias are quite beneficial for composing variations on guitar." "That sounds good," Matteo answered, but wasn't satisfied with his question. He knew his father had something to do with preventing his wishes, but didn't know why. For the time being, Matteo decided to enjoy going to the Paris Opera House to hear some of the best music put on stage. Caruli was right in saying that opera gave much inspiration to the musical mind. As the winter was drawing to a close, the early spring would make a more favorable track home. Matteo wept at the thought of leaving Paris. He begged his father to stay until April. Salvatore granted his wish, but as soon as Matteo turned 15, Salvatore insisted they head home. Matteo obeyed, as he had no choice. Though his eyes teared with the French countryside vanished, Matteo began to smile at the sights of Germany once more. He gazed out the carriage window, dreaming of his next tour. Salvatore sighed, knowing his son's festering plans, which were not meant to be. The journey home went fast, with few rests. It left Matteo exhausted, but he was pleased to be back in Italy. He missed his mother and brothers. Upon entering Florence and pulling up to the house, Marco and Luigi sprung out. They attacked Matteo with hugs, then rushed to Salvatore. Violante came, holding Carolina's hand, who was heavy in pregnancy. Salvatore smiled, happily, kissing his wife. "I see our next child has been growing since we left." "The child is soon to come." Carolina grinned. She turned to Matteo. "I can't believe my eldest is 15. Come, let us not stand in this spring chill, and get inside." Everyone helped in unpacking the carriage. Once everything was inside, Matteo settled his belongings in his room. He then flopped into bed for much-needed rest. The nap took him into dreams of Paris. "Matteo," Carolina interrupted the moment, "dinner is ready." Matteo headed downstairs to the table where everyone assembled. Carolina and Violante had arranged a lavish meal, consisting of duck and lamb. As they ate, Violante questioned, "Matteo, how far in the lessons did you get?" "Quite far in learning Latin and math," he answered, savoring the meat. "Excellent. How did you like your tour?" Carolina asked. Matteo brightened up. "Oh, it was the most wonderful. I cannot wait to plan another. Next time I'll have more of my own compositions." "Oh." Violante's tone sounded rather astray. She eyed both Carolina and Salvatore. Salvatore set his fork down to explain. "Son, you are now 15, and the eldest." "See, Papa, I know that." "It means that we must tell you." "Tell me what?" Matteo felt a bit anxious. Salvatore gave a hard response. "You are to study for the priesthood. Violante shall help you start your serious studies. You will still have music with the choir, and may play guitar in your spare time." "You mean I shan't travel any more?" Matteo dropped the food on his fork. Violante assured, "You will have many new important duties, better than a silly tour." Tears streamed down Matteo's sorrowed face. He felt embarrassed as everyone at the table stared at him. He couldn't believe his dreams were crushed, then and there.